Today we're going to cover an important topic, and that is prior year revenues earned and costs incurred. And the reason why this is an important topic is because when you're dealing with construction accounting, you're working with numbers from inception to date, which can overlap periods. You're always dealing with accumulated costs and accumulated billings. You want to know from beginning to the period you're reporting through how much cost you incurred, how much billings you had on a project. And when you factor in balances from inception to date, you have to figure out what portion of that related to the prior period, or in this case, the prior year, because you don't want to overstate your current year revenues and costs on your WIP schedule. Ultimately, this WIP should tie back to your trial balance, and your trial balance won't tie unless you factor in prior year activity. But in this lesson, we're going to cover what that means exactly. So let's assume this is the prior year WIP. We have our projects here, contract amounts. It's all filled out. We won't get into the details at this point. We have our over-under billings, and we have our revenues earned and costs to date. Now, fast forward, and we're in the current year. We have the following jobs open, which number 3 and number 4 carried forward from the prior year. We have a new open job, project 5. Then we go to our completed contracts, number 1 and number 2 from the prior year closed out. So, as you recall, we're dealing with inception to date amounts, assuming the whole contract amount was billed and the total estimated costs were accurate. We have total revenues of $50,000 for job 1, total costs of $40,000 on number 2, $40,000 in revenues, $30,000 in costs. Now, what we have to again keep in mind is that this is from inception to date, which means we have to carve out all of the revenue recognized in the prior year and all of the costs incurred in the prior year, so we get the current year activity. So the way we do that is we go to the prior year WIP, which we had over here, and we'll start with job number 1. Okay, we go to the prior year WIP, job number 1, we have our revenues earned of $37,000 and our costs of $30,000. Okay, this is how much revenue we recognized last year and how much cost we incurred last year. So we take these two amounts and we include them in this column, prior year revenues, prior year costs, and then the same idea with job number 2. We go to job number 2. We see that $33,333 was the revenues earned and $25,000 was the cost to date. And we paste those values here. Now, when you incorporate prior year activity, it's a reduction to get to the current year earnings, right? Because it's inception minus whatever you've recognized in the prior year gives you what you should recognize in the current year. So 50,000 minus 37,500, 12,500. 40,000 minus 30,000 gives you 10,000. I hope that part made sense, because what you're doing is canceling out all the revenue and costs from the prior year. You're not double dipping, right? Because of this 50,000 contract amount, you've already recognized 37,500 revenue from that, which includes the WIP. So you always have to remember that inception to date minus prior year will give you the current year's activity. So total of 19,167 recognized on jobs open in the prior year, closed in the current year. Costs 15,000, same idea, jobs open last year, closed this year. This is the current year activity. Inception minus prior year gives you current year activity. Now let's move on to the open jobs in the current year. Similar concept applies to open jobs. So jobs 3 and 4 were open last year and they're open this year. We're going to go to the WIP, the prior year WIP, and copy over the activity on these jobs. So job number 3 had revenues of 16,500 and costs of 11,000. We're going to paste it here. This is all based off the WIP template, which you can download on the website. Everybody's WIP looks different. This is just one that I use regularly for the videos. So then I go to job number 4, copy over that activity, paste that there. Now I have the true revenue for the current period. This formula here takes the revenues from inception to date minus what has been recognized in the prior year. Same with costs. Same over here where you have the cost to date from inception to date minus what's been recognized in the prior year. Now, the way to check your work to make sure you're doing this correctly is to add up your prior year activity, your prior year revenues earned, and your prior year cost to date on your current year WIP and current year completed job schedule to see if it ties back to the revenue earned on the prior year WIP. That's a lot to process. We're going to go over that example here real quick to demonstrate this. So on the WIP schedule, 2 of these jobs had activity from the prior year. We want to sum up the total prior year activity because there were some closed jobs with revenue recognized in the prior year as well. So we're going to take that total and then we're going to include the costs as well. Okay, and then we're going to sum both of these up. $95,333 of revenue was recognized in the prior year. 70,000 of costs were recognized in the prior year. Now, when I go back to this prior year WIP, these amounts should tie to the revenues earned and cost to date. You see here, 95,333, 70,000 in costs, 95,333, 70,000 in cost. So we know that we properly accounted for all of the prior year activity. These 2 amounts should always tie. You always want to be able to trace the prior year activity on your current year WIP and current year completed jobs back to the prior year WIP. And this is how you do it. This is how you know you have an accurate WIP schedule, is by doing this process and tying out the activity. So you've checked the box, you know you're working with solid numbers. Now you should be in a position where your current year activity ties to the trial balance once you factor in under/over billings. I hope that wasn't too much. I hope it made sense. If it doesn't, please let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next lesson.